In 1910, not a single commercial hair product was made for black women in America. Yet, within a decade, Madam C.J. Walker, born the daughter of enslaved parents, would sell her homemade formula door to door, while Annie Malone built a training empire that empowered 75,000 women. Together, they transformed kitchen experiments and church networks into a $10 million industry by 1920, forcing a market to exist where none did. But what does it mean when today's black hair care market is worth $9.4 billion, yet black ownership has plunged below 3%? The story behind this transformation and who truly benefits is far more complex than most people realize. Sarah Breedlove was born in 1867 on a Louisiana plantation, the first of her parents' children born free after slavery. Orphaned by the age of 7, she spent her childhood picking cotton and washing clothes, dreaming of a better life. As a young woman, she battled severe hair loss, an everyday struggle for black women at the time, made worse by harsh soaps, poor nutrition, and lack of access to healthy products. The mainstream beauty industry offered nothing for women like her. She found work as a laundress in St. Louis, earning barely $1 a day, but she paid close attention to the black women around her, watching how they cared for their hair, listening to their frustrations, and learning from their home remedies. Determined to find a solution, she began experimenting in her kitchen. According to her own story, the formula for her wonderful hair grower came to her in a dream. The recipe combined petrolatum, coconut oil, beeswax, copper sulfate, and sulfur, creating a scalp treatment that actually worked for black hair, a stark contrast to the damaging one-size-fits-all products sold in white-owned stores. She started small, selling her wonderful hair grower door-to-door across black neighborhoods, demonstrating the results herself. The business grew quickly, powered by trust and word of mouth. Walker trained other women as sales agents, offering commissions and teaching them the skills to earn their own living. In 1908, she opened Lilia College in Pittsburgh, a factory and beauty school named for her daughter. There, she taught women not just how to style hair, but how to manage money, build a clientele, and support their families. The Walker sales model wove together entrepreneurship, beauty, and community uplift, turning kitchens and church basements into launch pads for economic independence. By the time of her death in 1919, Madam C.J. Walker was widely recognized as America's first female self-made millionaire, her company employing thousands across the United States and the Caribbean. Her rise from washerwoman to business leader did more than create wealth. It opened doors for black women to support themselves, their families, and their communities in a country that had long denied them both opportunity and respect. Rumors and rivalry trailed the rise of black hair care's two biggest names. Newspaper columns in cities like St. Louis and Pittsburgh questioned who truly invented the original hair grower. Was it Annie Turnbow Malone, the chemist entrepreneur behind Poro College, or Madam C.J. Walker, the washerwoman turned millionaire? Headlines from the 1910s capture a swirl of claims and counterclaims, with one black press article asking, "Who first mixed the magic in a tin?" Court filings and business advertisements from the period show both women marketing similar products, each promising transformation, each using the phrase, "wonderful hair grower." In a 1913 legal notice, Malone's lawyers warned competitors against copying the Poro name or formula. Walker, for her part, insisted her recipe came to her in a dream, and her company's circulars dismissed imitators as unoriginal. The record stopped short of a definitive answer. No patent filings or sworn testimony survived to prove who first blended sulfur and petrolatum for black hair. What does remain are press snippets and legal threats, evidence of a market where innovation and imitation often collided. Historians today point out that both women operated in a world where black achievement was rarely protected by law. One expert notes that formula disputes were as much about respect as about money. In a segregated economy, a black woman's reputation was her currency.
The rivalry between Walker and Malone was real, but so was their mutual impact. Each built an empire, trained armies of sales agents, and left a paper trail of ambition. Their contested histories remind us that the story of black hair care is not a simple tale of one inventor, but a record of overlapping dreams, disputes, and relentless drive. Annie Turnbow Malone built her vision not around a single product or a singular brand, but around the power of collective advancement. Born in Illinois in 1869, Malone turned early experiments in chemistry, mixing hair treatments for her sisters, into a business that would transform the lives of tens of thousands of black women. In 1902, she established her enterprise in St. Louis, giving it a name with roots far beyond American borders. Poro drew from a West African society known for its spiritual and physical discipline, a deliberate choice that connected her company to a broader black identity and pride. Poro College opened its doors in 1918, quickly becoming much more than a beauty school. The complex spanned several acres, housing classrooms, a manufacturing plant, a dormitory, and even a rooftop garden. Here, Malone trained women not just in hair care, but in business, self-presentation, and financial literacy. Her system produced a workforce of Poro agents, an estimated 75,000 black women ranging in age from teenagers to grandmothers, who sold Poro products in cities, small towns, and across continents. These agents became breadwinners and entrepreneurs in their own right, building careers in a world that offered black women few other options for economic independence. Malone's business model was as much about empowerment as profit. She reinvested her wealth in the community, donating to institutions like Howard University, funding orphanages, and providing disaster relief after the 1927 St. Louis tornado. At its peak, Poro College was valued at over $1 million and stood as the largest black-owned business in St. Louis. Even as personal and financial struggles forced Malone to scale back her empire in the late 1920s, the legacy of her system endured. Poro College's graduates carried her methods and philosophy into beauty parlors and storefronts around the world, spreading not just products, but a model for collective uplift and self-determination. Beauty schools and church networks became the backbone of a new economic system designed by and for black women. In cities like St. Louis, Pittsburgh, and Chicago, beauty colleges opened their doors to students who saw more than just a trade. They saw a path to independence. At Lelia College and Poro College, women learned the science of hair and scalp care, but also the business of beauty, how to keep books, manage appointments, and build a loyal clientele. Graduation meant more than a certificate. It was a credential that carried weight in the community, a signal of expertise and professionalism in an era when few other professions were open to black women. The power of these schools extended far beyond the classroom. Each graduate became a node in a growing network, empowered to open her own shop, train apprentices, or join the ranks of traveling sales agents. The commission system turned personal initiative into shared prosperity. Agents purchased products wholesale and sold them at a markup, often keeping as much as 50% of each sale. For many, these earnings outpaced what domestic work or factory jobs could provide, allowing women to support families, buy homes, and invest in their neighborhoods. Churches served as both sanctuary and marketplace. After Sunday services, women gathered in fellowship halls to share news, offer testimonials, and demonstrate the latest hair preparations. Trust ran deep. What was recommended in these circles carried real authority. The church circuit was more than a sales route. It was a living network where business, faith, and mutual aid overlapped. Here, a woman's reputation was her calling card, and word of mouth could launch a career. This model thrived because it was rooted in community and self-reliance. Every sale, every training session reinforced a cycle of economic empowerment. The schools produced not just stylists, but entrepreneurs and leaders, women who created jobs for others, and built institutions that outlasted any single product or trend. By 1920, the combined efforts of these networks had built a market worth over $10 million, all before mainstream companies even acknowledged black consumers existed. The mechanics were simple but powerful: train, certify, connect, and uplift one woman at a time. By the middle of the 20th century, black ownership and innovation defined the hair care industry for African Americans. The laboratories and offices that dotted Chicago's South Side, Cleveland, and Detroit were not just small businesses. They were centers of research, product development, and economic power, built by people who understood both the science and the culture of black hair. Georgie Johnson, born in 1920 in Mississippi and raised in Chicago, started as a janitor in a cosmetics lab. He studied chemistry on his own, determined to create products that actually worked for black hair. In 1954, he launched Ultra Wave, a men's hair relaxer, and 3 years later introduced Ultra Sheen, a line for women. These products were designed specifically for the needs of tightly coiled hair, offering shine, manageability, and protection. Johnson's company grew rapidly, and by the 1960s, his lab was the largest in the world, devoted exclusively to black hair care. Johnson Products Company became the first black-owned business listed on the New York Stock Exchange, a milestone that sent a clear message about the scale and seriousness of black entrepreneurship. Long before Johnson's rise, Garrett Augustus Morgan had already changed the chemistry of black hair. In 1909, while working in his Cleveland workshop, Morgan invented the first chemical hair relaxer. His discovery was accidental. He was trying to reduce friction on sewing machine needles and noticed that the solution straightened the fibers it touched. Morgan launched the G.A. Morgan Hair Refining Company, marketing his relaxer as a way to achieve smoother hair without lye or harsh chemicals. His invention opened new possibilities for styling, but also sparked debate about beauty standards and identity, a conversation that would continue for generations. Samuel B. Fuller, another Chicago-based entrepreneur, started selling soap and hair products door to door in 1929. Fuller built his company from a single suitcase of goods into a multi-million-dollar enterprise, employing hundreds and mentoring the next generation of black business leaders, including George Johnson himself. Fuller's success proved that black ownership could thrive at scale, even when banks and white distributors refused to extend credit or shelf space. Throughout the 1950s, the 1960s, and the 1970s, black-owned brands dominated the market. Product launches were backed by scientific testing, community feedback, and a deep understanding of the lived experience of black consumers. These companies reinvested profits in local communities, sponsored scholarships, and created jobs that lifted entire neighborhoods. The science was advanced, the marketing was bold, and the profits stayed close to home. This era of control and innovation made the industry attractive to outside investors, setting the stage for a wave of acquisitions that would fundamentally change who benefited from black hair care. By the early 1980s, the world of black hair care looked nothing like it had a generation before. For decades, black-owned companies such as Johnson Products and Soft Sheen had set the standard, serving millions of customers and keeping profits circulating within black communities. But as the industry's value grew, so did outside interest. Corporate boardrooms that once overlooked black consumers now saw a booming market and a chance to buy in. The acquisition wave began quietly. In 1989, Johnson Products, the first black-owned company listed on the New York Stock Exchange, was sold to IVAX Corporation, a white-owned pharmaceutical firm. The deal was headline news,
Johnson Products had built its reputation with Ultra Sheen and Afro Sheen, products that had become household names and symbols of black pride. The new owners promised continuity, but for many the sale represented something deeper. The transfer of control from black hands to corporate interests far removed from the communities that built the brand. Soft Sheen, another Chicago-based powerhouse founded by Edward and Betty Ann Gardner, followed a similar path. Their company started as a family business in the basement of their home, growing into a multi-million-dollar enterprise with bestsellers like Carefree Curl. In 1998, after years of expansion, Soft Sheen was acquired by L'Oreal, the French cosmetics giant. The Gardners had built Soft Sheen on a foundation of community engagement and black employment, but the acquisition shifted decision-making power overseas. The familiar faces on the packaging remained, yet the profits and influence flowed elsewhere. These deals were part of a larger pattern. Throughout the 1980s and the 1990s, mainstream corporations bought up black-owned brands with promises of investment and growth, but the result was a steady erosion of black ownership. Decisions about product formulas, marketing, and distribution moved out of black neighborhoods and into distant boardrooms. The economic engine that once fueled local jobs, scholarships, and community programs now delivered returns to shareholders far removed from the lived experience of black consumers. For the first time since the days of Madam C.J. Walker and Annie Malone, the question of who truly benefited from the business of black hair became impossible to ignore. The legacy of innovation and empowerment built over generations now stood in tension with a new reality, a billion-dollar market, but profits and power shifting away from the very communities that created it.
Black consumers now spend an estimated $9.4 billion every year on hair care, more than the annual revenue of the entire American film box office. Shelves in beauty supply stores, drugstores, and big box chains are crowded with relaxers, edge controls, oils, and wigs tailored for black hair. Yet, beneath this abundance lies a stark imbalance. Less than 3% of this multi-billion-dollar market is controlled by black-owned companies. The overwhelming majority of profits flow to corporations and investors with no roots in the communities that drive the market. In many black neighborhoods, the storefronts that once bore the names of local entrepreneurs now belong to others. Korean-owned beauty supply stores outnumber black-owned stores by a ratio of 7 to 1. This shift began in the early 1990s as Korean immigrant families recognized the demand for black hair products and built a national network of retail and wholesale distribution. They gained access to supply chains and capital that were often out of reach for black business owners who faced higher barriers for loans and less favorable terms from distributors. The result is a retail landscape where the faces behind the counter rarely reflect the customers they serve. Modern black entrepreneurs still launch brands, open salons, and create new products, but breaking into the national retail market remains a steep climb. Major shelf space is controlled by conglomerates, and distribution contracts favor established players. Even when a black-owned product gains traction, acquisition offers from global cosmetics giants can be hard to resist, promising scale but often removing control from the original founders. The same cycle that began in the 1980s when household names like Johnson Products and Soft Sheen left black ownership continues in new forms today. The numbers are clear. For every dollar black consumers spend on hair care, less than 3 cents stays within black-owned businesses. The rest travels up a supply chain built on the spending power of a community, but rarely owned by it. The question remains, in an industry created by black women for black women, who truly profits from their legacy now? Today, black consumers drive $9.4 billion in hair care spending,
yet less than 3% of those profits reach black-owned companies. The industry built by visionaries like Madam C.J. Walker and Annie Malone now rewards others, as Korean-owned beauty supply stores outnumber black-owned stores 7-to-1 in black neighborhoods. Ownership is power, and that legacy still demands action. What does true empowerment look like now? Join the conversation below.